One of my goals for this year is to fire up the junkyard drag truck for the very first time. Now that sounds simple, but it's actually a pretty ambitious goal because we have a lot of work left to do. But here's the deal. I am building a twin turbo extended cab Silverado drag and drive truck exclusively from junkyard parts. We've got a 6.2 liter L92 and we have a 2003 Silverado, which is pieced together from probably a dozen different trucks. So the engine needs to go into the chassis. Now, if you're a longtime viewer of the channel, you know that this engine does represent a pretty big change of plans for this project. Some of you guys are excited about it, some of you guys not so much, because initially this truck had a 535-inch Gen 7 big block Chevy. But I got the engine fired up a little bit earlier this year and I was extremely frustrated with some admittedly small issues with it. But to solve that frustration, I did a complete 180 and built this instead. Now, it's from the junkyard and we just went through it, did kind of the basic upgrades, you know, bigger cam, better valve springs, ARP head studs, LS9 head gaskets, new oil pump, all new gaskets, gap the rings. And we did convert it over to a 24X, 1X cam crank sensor combo. But the short version is the engine's ready to go into the truck. Because this did have a big block mocked up in the frame prior, we did have to do a little bit of extra work. Well, not too bad actually, but we swapped out the frame mounts because the ones that were in here prior, I modified to hold the Gen 7 big block. Now, I kept this whole complete setup because who knows, maybe, I don't even want to say it, but maybe someday, you never know what'll happen. But for now, we've got the 6.2. I went ahead and grabbed some new atomic dropped motor mounts, so that'll bolt the engine into the chassis with the engine 1 inch lower. That'll just help the rear driveline angle be a little bit better because these trucks, I lower them quite a bit from where they were from the factory. Anyhow, let's get this engine in. So I know everybody was excited about the big block. Kind of sad to see me not use it. But here's the thing. The LS, yes, it's an overdone, overused, everybody does it sort of combo. However, there's a good reason. It's a proven recipe. There's tons of parts available. You can make lots of power with it. I know I can make my goals in terms of the 8-second ET with an LS. Maybe not this one. We'll build a stronger one. But that's what we're doing. Don't hit the firewall. Come on, LT. The only other thing I haven't checked on is if this oil pan is going to clear the diff. I think it will. It's from a 4-wheel drive, but it's a Gen 4 oil pan and a Gen 3 truck. So hopefully there's no like minor little differences that hold us up. We will find out in a second.
Looks like a city.
Close, I gotta get the motor mounts bolted up. Uh-oh. That might not work. My oil drain plug, or my oil drain port for the pan is like almost touching the diff. It will lean back a little bit, so we might be okay, but that's gonna be real tight. So we get the 6.2 in place, and the very next thing that we're going to do is get a transmission installed. And this is going to follow the same theme that I'm doing with the engine. This is just temporary. And I know that probably doesn't make a lot of sense because a lot of the stuff that we're doing is going to have to get redone later on. At least with the engine, it's in, it's rebuilt, it's ready to go, and that'll work probably till 7 or 8 or 850 horsepower as it is, with boost, of course. Transmission-wise, they'll probably have to refresh it at some point because this one is literally straight out of the junkyard, or Eddie's backyard technically, but straight out of the junkyard, and it's going to go in the truck. We're assuming it was pulled from a running and driving vehicle that was in the collision, so we'll find out. But again, this is all about assembling it and getting the entire package working, and then we will upgrade the individual components as need be. Like I said, the engine's kind of done. The rear end, this is actually really good to go. This is a got torque differential 14 bolt. We got some really nice suspension back here. We got some good suspension up front too. We're just gonna get it painted in or powder coated right now. But again, my desire to get the truck running outweighs my desire to rebuild every last component individually before we get the whole thing running. If that makes sense. Which I'm embarrassed to say this, but that follows that mantra of don't get it right, get it running, which I hate that saying with a passion, because normally I'm all about get everything 1,000%. But here we are. So maybe there's something to that saying after all, as much as I hate to admit it. Oh, quick overview, kind of spaced that part, but 4L80, four-wheel drive transmission, of course. We have a DTR fab cross member. I've used these before. They work great because the spacing is a little different. Generic stock mount, and just a 4L80 OEM GM dipstick tube. And the flex plate is for it's like the LQ4 6-liter 4L80 combo with the spacer and the flat flex plate. So that's what we're gonna do to get the transmission installed. Again, for now, later on, I'm probably gonna do I'm gonna have my buddy Brent build me a really nice 4L80 for this one, but for now, we're getting it running. And of course, I forgot to press record, but there's a transmission more or less bolted up. Now, the very real truth about this is a junkyard 4L80 is probably one of the best transmissions out there. Perfect fit every time. Every now and then I stop, take a break, and think to myself, what on earth possessed me to build a truck entirely out of junkyard parts? Because on the surface, it sounds like a good idea, and admittedly, this is kind of a plan that snowballed because initially, this whole project was supposed to be just a frame swap on the ugly truck, the truck we just gave away. But as plans often do, things snowballed out of control, and here we are. We're building a truck from used parts and pieces, and it's a lot more difficult than it sounds because it's just the little stuff. Like yesterday, for example, I have like 3 separate bins of OEM bolts from various stuff. So I've been going through cleaning, organizing, locating, bagging and tagging, and trying to remember where everything was from a project that's been going on for 3 years. That's when we started the chassis. And over the course of that time, I have changed my mind about a few things, and the front suspension is one of them. Real quick, status update, I guess, of where we're at, because I've been picking away at a lot of little things. We have the engine in, long block pretty much ready, accessory drives in, waiting for a power steering pump. Cooling fans are in, everything's from here up is wired. We do have to pull the cab off, which we'll talk about that later, but this will all stay intact, just straight up. Anyway, suspension, one of those things that we're going to change. We ditched the torsion bars long ago. We built these upper mounts, which I got to admit I am loving. That works out great. The initials are kind of tacky, but it makes a cool shadow. Anyway, as far as you guys knew, the front suspension was done. We had a aluminum knuckle, a aftermarket control arm, and it worked with my coilover conversion that we did. So these were the upper control arms, and this is the aluminum knuckle from like a 2015, 2017 truck, something like that. But to get this all to work on a 2003 truck, like all the ball joints are completely different. So they used on the lower control arm, they used an OEM ball joint for like a 03 Silverado, but they used this steel taper adapter because this aluminum knuckle, everything's bigger on the taper for the knuckles. They used this style of bolt-in ball joint for the upper. That's why the control arm has the bolt-in thing. And then the tie rod, this is sort of the same taper as like a 2500 HD of this body style, but it's much thicker. So the tie rods wouldn't articulate fully, they would kind of bind up. I was never happy with the upper control arms. So we're changing things up a little bit. I do like the fact that this whole combo is very lightweight, but this whole business about these conversion ball joints and tie rod ends, it didn't sit well with me, and I wasn't happy with the upper control arm. So I hopped on the old Google machine and I found the original style upper control arms actually fit with the coilover conversion that we did. So that's our aftermarket lower control arm, which we did modify a little bit. It works well with the OEM style upper arm, which I like this because I'm putting an iron knuckle back on it. Yeah, it's a little bit heavier, but that way we don't have to mess around with weird tapers and ball joint adapters. The OEM 1500 ball joint fits this control arm and that knuckle with no spacers or adapters needed. And now the only thing I am going to do though is, because this uses a smaller taper than the 2500, I am going to increase the taper of just the tie rod end, so I can use a 2500 HD, like a PPE, for example. They make a really good, super beefy tie rod for four-wheel drive launches. And believe it or not, the inner tie rod end is the same thread as a Duramax. So that's what the new setup's gonna look like. Yeah, a little bit heavier, but still much lighter than stock because we ditched the torsion bar cross member, and the lower control arms, even though we did reinforce them from where they showed up, they're still much lighter than anything factory. So that's going to be the new setup. We are going to put a little bit of paint on the lowers, but anyway, that's where we're at. And I figured while we're in there, we might as well wire wheel and deburr the edges of these knuckles. A little bit too rusty. So definitely looking a lot better now that we have this painted, and I'm embarrassed to say I let it rust for so long because I worked on these control arms initially, again, back in like 2022, and it sat, and we trailered it from Utah to Colorado, and it sat some more, so a little bit of rust on there, but now they're painted, they look good. It's time for ball joints. Little quick tidbit here. These are the bolts that come with the ball joint to hold it into an OEM lower control arm. I did modify these after I got them. I welded on this tab here in a slightly different spot. That's for the lower control arm. Made out of some beefy 3/8 inch thick material. I added a couple of reinforcement braces underneath to help support the weight of the truck. And then finally, I added this lower ball joint plate because these normally only came with one, and I like a double shear mount. So this is very much like the way an OEM ball joint attaches. I don't like, however, the bolts that they give you because number one, they're a little bit sloppy in the hole, but two, you can see the threads of the bolts start in here where that's a little bit weaker. This is a grade 8 bolt that has a shoulder that goes all the way through, so that's going to make a much tighter or a better fit because where it goes through the body of the ball joint here, there's no threads that can wear into the ball joint itself. Only problem is most of these that you buy with the right shank on them have too much thread. So I have to do just a little bit of cutting to make them the appropriate length. And that's what it's going to look like when it's all done. So 100% engagement with the shank of the bolt and no threads. All right, so that's the suspension mocked up, and I am now finally really happy with the way that everything is looking, functioning, and how it all turned out. So again, custom upper coil mounts. I forget, those are like a 7 or an 8 inch travel coilover. We do have the modified lower control arms, iron knuckle. So yeah, a little bit heavier than what we had before, but the strength trade-off, in my opinion, is definitely worth it. And then we don't have to mess around with like ball joint adapters and weird tapers and stuff like that. The only problem that we have yet to solve is with the steering, which technically isn't a problem because we could just hook up a regular old half-ton tie rod from there to there and be done with it. I have these, which are a like from a same year 2500 HD tie rod. The only difference really is the outer. The inner is the same whether it's a half-ton or 2500. So if we could oversize it, we could make this tie rod fit into the half-ton knuckle, which is this guy here. The only problem is that's not just a straight or a taper all the way through. It kind of looks like this, where it's tapered for the first, well, 2/3 of the hole. So technically it, come on. So technically it kind of looks like that, and then it's straight, but that's an awful drawing. Anyway, I'm going to try to drill it straight through and then ream it oversized, but because I don't want to mess up my freshly painted knuckle, we're going to do it on a test one because I have like 3 extra sets of these from different trucks I've parted out over the years. So let's give it a shot, and then if it works, we'll put 2500 HD outer tie rods on the truck. Otherwise, we'll just get some upgraded half-ton outer tie rods because I think Kryptonite makes a pretty good set for the half-ton. Anyway, so let's get to drilling. All right, so the best I could come up with is I have a 9/16 drill bit here. The ideal size would be a 35/64, which is about 15 thousandths of an inch smaller, but we now have the correct size for the stud to go down through, and now all we have to do is increase the taper until it goes to about here. And you can see that blue mark. That's where I want the taper to go. On the aluminum knuckles, it went clear up here. So there's like a little natural change of angle right there. Come on. All right, I'm satisfied. Let's do it to the real thing. Obviously, you can remove a lot of material in a hurry, but I'm just trying to kind of sneak up on it. Just need to go a little bit deeper, and we're there. Boom. So there you go. If you want 2500 HD tie rods on your half ton, you need a 35/64 drill bit and a 10-degree reamer. That's a really good fit. When your elbow pops, that's how you know it's tight enough. Calibrated elbow. And my favorite trick on big jobs, the little orange dot. It lets me know that I tightened it down, because inevitably there's going to be some things I don't tighten, some things I do tighten, and this is a great visual reminder. So for front brakes, we're running this Powerstop stuff. It's from like an 05 and up. I believe it's a 13-inch rotor. These actually used to be on the front of Ugly Truck before I switched that one to the 14-inch setup, the Bears. But these had really good stopping power also, so no sense not to use them. It's definitely easy to get overwhelmed on a project like this because we're doing so much, trying to focus on every part, and there's so much to do. It looks like we're close, which I guess we kind of are, but there's so many little things left to do before we can even fire this thing up for the very first time. But we actually did make good progress in today's episode, which was spread out over 2 weeks worth of work for me, but the light is at the end of the tunnel, I feel like. We started out with an empty engine bay. Now we have our modified 6.2 liter LS3, L92, whatever we're calling this, stuck in the frame rails. We got the manifolds on, we've got the intake, we got the accessory drive, just waiting for power steering pump. And then this will kind of be ready to start tackling the wiring, which is a big job. We've got our suspension in place. Very happy that we took the time to change over to the different upper control arms. Because even stuff like this, it makes me happy to have a little spot to have the brake flex hose attached to the control arm. And I would have had to make my own on the aftermarket arm that we had. Got our Duramax tie rods on there. I do have to still get the upgraded versions. This is just a stock one. But we're pretty much back to rolling chassis status, which means we've got a couple of major things checked off the list. So I'm happy. What we have left to do, the major bullet points are plumbing the chassis, so fuel lines, brake lines, and then electrical. The electrical is going to be a lot of modification just because with the LS3/L92, there's a lot of stuff in different locations, like the cam sensors now up here instead of behind the intake. The NOx sensors are down on the side of the block instead of under the valley. We have a few modifications to make for our late model 90mm throttle body, or 87 or whatever it is. And then we want to reroute things because typically on the trucks, the wire harness comes straight across here to the intake, but I want to leave this corridor kind of empty for the turbo because I want to do twins. This side is easy. There's a, we just pull the air box, maybe move the coolant tank, but lots of room for turbo activities here. And we want to, my microphone is tangled, we want to accommodate the turbo over here. So I might even, for example, relocate this proportioning valve so I have room possibly to like run a downpipe through there around the steering shaft. So that's like the next phase. And again, my main objective is to get this thing running. But we made great steps today. Thank you guys for watching. Come back soon.